Hello everyone and welcome to today's panel discussion, how visibility and machine learning make cyber incident detection and response results better, by our panelists Yuri Diogenes and Sunil Varkey. I'm Richa and I'll be your host for the day. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to organizer or panelists, please post your query in the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio and video challenges, please check your internet connections or you may log out and log in again. An important announcement for certificate of attendance. Participants needs to attend the complete webinar to qualify for the certificate of attendance. Participants should fill in the survey form in the attendee thank you email and answer the 3 questions based on the webinar provided with the right answers within the same day. If these 2 criteria are met, then only the participant will receive the certificate of attendance within 5 to 7 working days after the event. About our panelist, Yuri Diogenes, he is the Principal Program Manager for the Microsoft CxE Security team for Azure Security Center and Azure Defender. Yuri has been working for Microsoft since 2006 and has spent 5 years as a Senior Support Escalation Engineer for the CSS Forefront Edge team. From 2011 to 2017, he worked for the Content Development team, where he also helped create the Azure Security Center content experience since its launch in 2016. Yuri has published a total of 26 books, mostly covering information security and Microsoft technologies. Yuri also holds an MBA and many IT and security industry certification and has a Master of Science in Cybersecurity Intelligence and Forensics Investigation from UTICA College. Now, our second panelist, Sunil Varkey, has over 25 years of security leadership experience with large global corporates in banking, telecoms, ITES software, and manufacturing. Sunil is Forescout VP for its EMEA and APJ region, involved in security strategy, innovation, and stakeholders engagement. Before this, he led cybersecurity assessment and testing for HSBC. He also worked with Symantec as CTO and strategist, Wipro as global CISO, and fellow as head of security and privacy at Idea Cellular and in GE, Barclays, and SAP. Academically, he holds a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering with an MBA. He has participated in various advisory forums globally, publishing and presenting various articles related to the information assurance domain. He has filed for multiple patent applications on information security that are currently under consideration. So without any further delay, I would hand over the session to our panelists.
Thank you very much for the intro. Thanks for having us. Sunil, great pleasure to have you today here.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so that's an extremely important topic that we are going to discuss today. And before we go into the topic per se and start digging into the benefits of machine learning for visibility and incident response, I'd like to step back a little bit and talk about the importance of strength your security posture to reduce incidents, right? Because if the theme is incident response and how machine learning is going to help you with that, ideally, we will be proactive to even avoid an incident. We gotta stop being reactive. It's important to have controls in place to detect. It's important to leverage machine learning as soon as possible to improve your detection capabilities, but it's also important to reduce the likelihood that a threat actor will be able to exploit something. And with that is where it lands the topic of the day for the most part, which is security hygiene, which is a topic that a lot of people don't want to discuss because it's sometimes boring. You have to remediate things, you have to apply patch, you have to do hardening. And when you go to a cloud environment where you have so much workloads and you really don't understand the security state of the workloads, it becomes a challenge. So you need to have a cloud security posture management platform that is able to look across your workloads in the cloud, understand the attack vector of each workload, and provide you with security recommendations. And ideally, you want to do that in a platform that is able to do multi-cloud, right? You are able to see this not only from your Azure workloads, but also your AWS, your GCP workloads. So you have this platform, single pane of glass for secure posture management, and you can then start improving your secure posture. Because as you improve your secure posture, you reduce the likelihood that you have new incidents, because you are basically closing all the doors, and now you are making harder for the threat actor to get in. So very important topic. Let's also make sure to always go back to this, because secure posture is about protection, detection, and response. We always need to circle back to protection. We cannot only emphasize the detection, and we cannot only make investments in detection and response. We need to invest also in prevention. What is your thoughts on that, Sunil?
No, very well said, Yuri. That's true, because incident response, actually the life cycle starts saying that, like you mentioned, reduce the likelihood, and which is essentially the reduction of attack surface, because it is a continuous exercise. Because you need to, because there are two schools of thoughts. One school of thought is saying that I cannot control internally, so let me focus on the external side and put a lot of resources and the manpower, technologies, and all possible things to defend, while I don't care much, or I don't have much of a control internally. The second school of thought, which is sustainable, is saying that let me continuously work and reduce the attack surface, which is essentially what you said, the compliance postures and all of that thing. So I reduce the likelihood on a continuous basis, and so that the number of attacks are less, and even if that happens, I'll be in much better positions to detect and respond in a sensible way. And that is where the story of the visibility also come into picture, because fundamentally you need to have a clarity on what you are trying to protect, and what is the posture of it, and how is your traffic baseline look like, what is good, bad, and very well said, Yuri. It is essentially the same thing coming back on reducing this thing. Once that is done, then your managing an incident will be much easier. Otherwise you'll have no clue what is going to happen. Yuri.
Yeah, not only you have no clue, but is you are trying to, we have this saying in Brazil, you are trying to dry a piece of ice. You try to get that piece of ice and dry, and it's a continuous work, right? You need to get the lessons learned from an incident and put it back on your security posture. For example, if you have an exposed storage account on the internet with public access open, and you have classified information on the storage account, what's going to happen is the threat actor will go and find that information, because there are a lot of scans, online scans, freely available on the internet, that are just looking at those open storage accounts and try to find useful information. So if you do not use this moment that an incident took place, and you learn from that incident, and you incorporate that learning on your secure posture, it's going to happen again. And it will be a continuous problem to handle, right? It's almost like our patch management problem that we have for the past 10 years or more, which is every time that it comes a patch Tuesday, many customers, they take a long period of time to update the system. So that gap of 15 days that you have a known vulnerability that is not patched, you are just giving more chances to threat actors to exploit. So you need to have security controls in place if you want to reduce the likelihood of a potential attack. Now, with that, let's dig into more about the threat detection for cloud workloads. Now that we've done our homework with the prevention and we improve our secure posture, we are basically using the concept of being diligent, right? Due diligence, which is something that we always should do from the security professional standpoint. Now we are going to detection mechanism. In other words, over the years, we've been adopting what we call the assume breach mindset, or assume compromise mindset, because let's go a little bit in history here, right? If you go back to the medieval castles and how they used to protect the perimeter and how they used to protect the castle, it was all about you have to protect. There is no way that anyone will get in. You have to protect the castle. That castle protection mechanism nowadays does not work, because as a former FBI director said, there are two types of companies: the ones that were compromised and the ones that do not know that they were compromised. So the assume breach mentality comes into this moment to say, okay, you need to assume that at some point in time you'll be compromised. The question is, how are you going to quickly detect, and how are you going to quickly respond? Because if you quickly respond, you are reducing again that window in which the threat actor is already inside the network trying to perform a malicious activity, and you can contain that attack. So it's very important not only to detect, but to respond. So the threat detection in a cloud environment is critical, because each cloud workload has a different set of attack vectors. You cannot use the mindset of, okay, I come from on-premise. On-premise, I used to have this IDS, this NDS system that were protecting my assets on-prem. I'm just going to migrate to the cloud. It really doesn't work like that, because the attack vector is different. The workload has different ways, different threat landscape. So you need to adjust the threat detection to be specific for the attack vector of the workload. A storage account has a different attack vector of a VM, of a key vault, of a web application, right? So you need to have the detections for those specific scenarios. The idea is, again, is to quickly identify that the threat actor is already in the environment and then contain that with a good response. What's your thoughts on that, Sunil?
It is very true, because we are operating in a totally different terrain now, and the advisories are highly motivated. So the traditional way of a signature-based security controls is no longer enough. So I'm not saying it is not relevant. It is relevant, because we have commodity type of attacks, we have sophisticated, we have APTs. So there are various counts. So large volumes will be commodity type of malwares and those type of things. We need signature-based. But signature based alone is not going to help us moving forward, because we operate in a completely different terrain. Now that is where the power of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all are going to come into picture, for a fundamental reason. The volume of data which is getting generated from each of these data sources are huge, and we have skill set shortage. And especially we are talking about, when I said new terrain, cloud is a new terrain. Okay, work from is a new terrain for us. All of that thing we are not experienced enough to handle. The skill is still building up. So we need something to help us out on to take accurate decisions, or at least to notify us what is required. Now the second issue coming out is, companies have done a lot of automations or RPAs related to these things, but now the machine learning is picking up more at a product level and not at an enterprise level fully, because they have a challenges on the data set available to make the machine learning learn that much, and the skill set is an issue on that. And then they worry, saying that what if the data is poisoned or data is corrupt, or integrity comes into a data issue? What will be the decision going to happen? So even if it is happening, it is at an alert level where somebody has to take a act on it. The problem there is, as you mentioned, when an attack happens, time to respond is crucial. We cannot take, so typically what happens is, when an endpoint, we know there is a compromise, we raise a ticket and we wait for the workstation engineer to find out this particular user. Many times they struggle to identify where this machine is, and then it takes around 24 to 48 hours. We cannot wait for it, because immediately propagations of the attack starts, lateral movement starts on that. So we need to orchestrate the control in some manner, and the actions can be taken. That is where visibility becomes an important thing. If I know what is happening, where is it happening, how is it happening, though all those details of the posture and the context, I can define policies to take a action which is immediate. And that's where the world is moving on. What do you feel, Yuri, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summarized pretty well. I would just add also the fact that with machine learning, one of the biggest advantage that we see is that it can also learn on the fly. It can, and this is very important to reduce false positive. Our SOC is flooded with alerts. And as you said, there's a shortage of human resource to work on that. So it doesn't really help if we are getting alerts for everything, if we are not optimizing the false positive aspect of the alerts. So the fact that machine learning can learn on the fly and can make adjustment and can train the model to reduce the false positive is huge. It's something that is very important. We need to take that in consideration as well. So it's not only about the buzzword machine learning, is about the benefits, the direct and indirect benefits. This is very important. It also can be beneficial to learn about patterns of behaviors for unknown vulnerabilities, right? Because threat actors might not be exploiting a known vulnerability. They might be using techniques, known techniques, to perform a suspicious activity. So that's another advantage. If machine learning is trained well to understand those patterns of behaviors and they can raise alerts based on patterns of behaviors, that's huge, because you can shorten the time period that you're going to respond to an alert, right? You think about the scenario that I was explaining before about reduce the gap between detection and response. That's where machine learning can do a huge difference to give you more awareness right in the beginning of the attack. And if we step back and we even look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, those components of detection, protection, and response, all those areas can take benefit of machine learning. So it's not, machine learning is not only about threat detection, it can be about threat hunting, it can be about learning about behaviors and how to improve your secure posture. So it can be used in different arenas within your cybersecurity strategy.
Yeah, it's very true. I have worked on product companies where they leverage machine learning in a very big way. So an example, and that cloud helped that in a big way. When we say reducing the gap between the detection and the remediation, the cloud played a big role. For the reason, what they used to do is they defined what is good. Okay, when I say what is good, a particular application is it, what are the calls it does internally. So that, and they define and say these are all good. And the moment that mission, so assuming that I have millions of endpoint devices running my software, and I have defined good there, and if I see a deviation at any point of time, when I say deviation, it is suddenly calling a process which is not relevant, or it is doing a command and control or any of those things, immediately the machine learning will alert the cloud intelligence center saying that I'm seeing a pattern difference here.
Yeah.
And once that comes to the central server, they analyze further to say that, okay, this is because they will have additional intelligence collected. And the moment that is done, the signature or the action is being pushed down to that million devices through the cloud. Because in our earlier days, that was not a practical thing because every endpoint was different. I mean, they were in on-prem, they were not connected to the cloud, and you have to either give the downloads and they have to do, it takes a lot of time. Now the advantage is the cloud, they can immediately push it down and things are changing. So there is a great usage in the cybersecurity which is happening over there. And I have also worked on organizations where hundreds of bots have been created using the logical or illogical toxic combinations. So they define on the data set and say that if this and this, then this comes together, that is the toxic combination. And this is how you need to act. When the act can be an alert, it can be blocking something or whatever it is need to be done, it has to be done based on that logical combination. That is where I mentioned product companies are doing a great job on that. Cloud is helping them in that. Now coming to the enterprise side, their challenge is that they don't have the data set available to make the machine learning learn. And they are also not confident the accuracy of the data which it can learn. And they don't have the skill set also. All the combinations are happening. So they have reached the hyper automation level where a lot of menial tasks being done by the automation component of it. The matured organizations are doing it. I'm also writing an article on 100 use cases on that. purely based on visibility, and then how you can leverage an action based on that. So I fully concur to what you said. That is the way it is.
And I think that you touched on a very important point about training the model, and that's where cloud computing and cloud providers that are offering security solutions will play a big role. Because if you think about a cloud provider that has all that data, they can help and learn based on the behavior of their customers and alert you right up front if something is happening, because they have the data, they have the big data to analyze and to create patterns and to understand malicious activity, right? So that's huge. If you think about, for example, something that a lot of companies are trying to implement nowadays, which is zero trust principles, right? Zero trust strategy. But zero trust strategy always starts with establishing zero trust principles. And the zero trust principles are three: verify explicitly, least privilege, and assume breach. We already talked about assume breach. Now let's talk about verify explicitly. If you think about what that really means, it means that an old Russian saying, trust by verify, right? That Ronald Reagan repeat that phrase, but it's actually from Russia. Trust but verify. So you have to verify everything. It's not only about authenticating a user anymore. It's about authenticating and constantly verifying the user's identity when the user is trying to use something. And the power of the cloud comes in many of those scenarios, because, for example, you need to take things in context. If you are verifying a user, what if a user is traveling for a suspicious location, a location where there is an outbreak of botnet, or there is an outbreak of a new malware, and the user is actually physically trying to log on from that geolocation? So you need to take in consideration the source of the connection. You need to take in consideration all that for every single access, not only the initial authentication. For example, if Sunil is traveling to a high suspicious country at some point in time, and he is trying to access a file that he never accessed before in a server that has classified information, that's definitely a red flag to raise, right? And that's based on what? Machine learning, behavior, patterns, because I know I have a lot of signals and I have a lot of data to correlate. And based on that data correlation, I can conclude that this is a suspicious activity. I will temporarily disable your account. I'll send an email to you. So I automate all that process to facilitate my communication with you, to verify if you are really you and if you are really doing that type of access from that location. And depending on my company policy, I might say, no, if you are trying to access from a suspicious location, it might be you, but we will not allow you to access at all, because your machine might be compromised, and we don't trust the location where you are, and you will not access. So taking consideration all those signals, all those aspects, is very powerful. And if a company is trying to create all that based on on-prem solutions, it's going to probably be millions of dollars to do that, and they will still not have all the analytics and the data to train the model to be intelligent enough to take decisions, right? So that's the advantage of leveraging cloud services for that purpose. Do you see a lot of adoption of cloud service for that purpose, Neil?
Yes, Yuri, it is true. Like you mentioned, we are evolving in this way, on a continuous basis. I think the COVID pandemic also accelerated a lot of those things. And there is good side and the bad side of it, because there was a rush, a lot of open issues are there. But if you look at, so 2 years back, we said the profile-based activity has to happen, or persona-based access has to be defined. And that was a static personas. Now, it is moving down to say that we have to work on the dynamic context-based personas. So an example is that, like you mentioned, when somebody is connecting to your system, we need to validate where they're connecting, all of that thing. And once they are connected, we also need to, on a periodic basis, validate whether they are in the right posture. So an example, or reason, machines are connected directly to the internet, many of them. So they can get compromised at any point of time. Their agents running inside for a security control can fail. Their posture can change dynamically at any point of time. And there are a lot of servers and other devices within the enterprises. They are not connecting from outside periodically because they are inside the network. And the traditional NAC, if you look at, they worked on allowing an access. They done the check with limited context. Now the modern NAC is saying that no, you have to move much further and look at the context and get that remediated if it is working. And there is a new concept called comply to connect, which is adopted by many organizations. And my company is promoting that. Forescout is promoting in a big way. What we are saying is that the same on the zero trust you mentioned, verify the trust at a periodic basis. Look at your traffic which is coming out, which is the posture of the devices, and that is the way to go. And that is a starting. So starting point, like you mentioned, zero trust is becoming extremely relevant now in the current context because the perimeter is vanished. So earlier concept was everything inside is trusted, outside is bad or non-trusted. Now there is no inside or outside. The supply chain is connected directly. They have higher privilege. We have the trust. So that doesn't work out. So we need to start understanding what are we trying to protect, the visibility of it. And then we have to say that, let me understand the traffic, how it is happening. And the segmentation also coming into picture in a big way, because I need to limit the blast radius if something goes wrong.
Yep.
And it is easy to manage in that manner. So the machine learning is coming a big play over there to understand this behavior changes. Because another major issue, if you look at, many of the attacks happening are due to the errors, omissions, or oversight of an insider. When I say insider, a constituent who was responsible to do something. Because many attacks we see, they say, okay, millions of data leaked and all of that. And if you actually go back, it was not the provider's problem. It was the one who configured did not configure well. And now the machine learnings can help a lot to identify that deviation. That is where visibility and knowing what is good has to be defined. And then you build the machine learning, because enough and more frameworks are available. And people who are looking for a career in machine learning, there is a huge space. But what is important to visualize what they wanted to achieve and how do they achieve. When I say how do I achieve, what are the data sources you need to build in? What is the event of interest you need to bring in? What is the use case you are going to try? How that will impact the overall objectives. Yuri.
Yeah, that's I love the fact that you brought the visibility aspect, because that's one of the main problems on this journey to the cloud that a lot of customers they are facing is in the past they have full visibility of their on-prem. They knew what was running and everything. Now in this new model, first with shared responsibility, where the customers still have responsibility for their workloads, and the cloud provider has some responsibility for the underlying infrastructure. But the fact is, if you don't have a platform that can give you visibility across all the workloads that you are provisioning, it's going to be challenging, because a lot of our organizations, they are having problems with shadow IT. People are just provisioning resources, provisioning VM, provisioning storage accounts in the subscription, and even creating new subscription within the tenant based on the credit card information of that specific department. So now you have a tenant where the security team thought that they were managing one subscription. Now they have like 50 subscriptions running, and they have no idea who is the owner. They have no idea who owns the workload. So that's very problematic. Either you have a good governance in place, and usually governance only comes with your level of maturity in the cloud journey, right? Or you have a tool that at least shows to you all those workloads and the secure state of those workloads. So that's very important. And I'm gonna give you, we are talking about a completely vendor agnostic solution here, but I gotta give you, I gotta hook Azure Security Center here, because it's free. Azure Security Center is a free solution from Microsoft. It allows you to provisioning, enable the subscription, and at that point on, you can visualize the secure state of all the workloads. So this is very important. Take advantage of the native tools that the cloud provider is giving you from the secure perspective. There is absolutely no reason for not use the free tools that are available. There are many free tools in each cloud provider, not only Azure, but AWS, GCP. You've got to take advantage of those tools to elevate your secure posture. And part of the secure posture is visibility, as you said. You got to know what is running on your environment.
You rightly said. There is the visibility is a hygiene foundational requirement to build a security program. What changed in these years is that earlier the visibility was built, either the procurement team will say these are the softwares we procured, this is the hardware provisioned, this much is deprovisioned, so we believed on that. But all the organizations I worked with or interacted tried building CMDB and never was successful. They compromised at a CADB or lower than that. Now, then we said, I'm going to put agent, I am going to count the list of SCCM plus TANIUMs or any of those agents to say that this is how I'm going to count on that. But now the problem is that we have a lot of unmanaged devices where people are bringing BYOD systems or we are allowing access through other systems. We have OT and IoT systems internally, and those are not agentable devices. And agents are also failing in periodic basis. So due to which the accuracy of the visibility has completely gone off. And that is a major problem there. And the cloud, when it comes in, it is heavily dependent, like you mentioned, heavily dependent on the service provider, because they have the visibility, they can help out with the tools where people can leverage and take the granular level. What is the visibility means? If you look at, I have written a blog earlier saying that what is required on a cloud, what is cloud security? Cloud security is essentially security while connecting to the cloud, security of the cloud, and security of the workloads in the cloud. So we have to look at in 3 different components. At the while connecting, we can look at the traffic patterns and workloads, and there is a collaborative approach using all these tools to come into picture. So now, while many organizations has done enough work on visibility and they were good on that, the last 2-3 years changed the entire estate in a new way because of unmanaged devices, the new terrains, the IoT, OT devices, and all of that thing. That is why visibility is coming back as a major topic to discussion in many places. And machine learning can actually work effectively only if it is also having the adequate data which is contributed to a great extent by the visibility. Because when I say visibility, it is not just knowing that what is there. I also need to know who is using it, where is it connected, and what is running in it. I need the full context of that system.
Yep, and not only from the detection perspective, but also this is extremely helpful from the prevention perspective. So if you start leveraging machine learning more for data correlation and help you to prioritize what needs to be remediated, because let's think about one organization with thousands of resources and they have thousands or millions of things to remediate. They need to prioritize. And the prioritization of remediation needs to take in consideration a series of factors. If you have to gauge each factor manually for millions of resources, it's going to be a lot of work. So using machine learning to also say, look, you have this exposed storage account, you have 100 exposed storage accounts, but out of that 100, only 10 have confidential information. Out of those 10, only 3 really are not encrypted, right? So now you reduce from 1,000 to 3 that you need to remediate right away. But why? Because a lot of information was taken in consideration, the threat vector, the type of attack, the state of the information, the data classification. So you take everything into consideration, and then it helps you to prioritize what you need to remediate. So let's also ensure that people understand that machine learning is not only about threat detection, it's also about threat prevention.
Yes, Yuri, and that's exactly the context. Okay, I'll take a small example on Windows. When a login fails, you can just look at further with the event of interest in the data source to say that, is this user failing by sitting in front of the system, or is he failing because he's coming from a remote connection, or is he failing because that user doesn't exist, or it's a disabled account? So you can create a context, and based on saying that, if it is a user doesn't access, there is a possibility that you will see the same IP trying to try another user ID. So then the context completely changed, saying that it is not a legitimate act, it is not error, it is an attack. Okay.
Yeah.
This is where, because it is too difficult for an organization's sys administrators to look at this and identify easily manually. The reason is, you are getting between 8 to 10 in the morning, you are going to see a huge spike of authentication activities. So the machine learning and automations and all come into picture and say, they can immediately identify this pattern and say that I am seeing somebody trying multiple accounts, many of them doesn't exist or disabled, and he's connecting from a remote site, and that IP belongs to a blacklisted range. Then the context completely changes.
Yeah.
Okay, that is where, as you mentioned, the context is taking a totally adds a lot of value for that, and that is where the machine learning and the leveraging of the data becomes so prominent.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And as again, you need to prioritize things. At the end of the day, you have a limited amount of resource, human resources to do things. So you have to leverage automation more and more to do a lot of things. But you also need to talk about usability. You don't want to start blocking people without any reason. So you need to reduce false positives, and you need to prioritize what is important for you, for your company, not only to secure the environment, but to allow the user to be productive, because that's another problem. Every time that we introduce more and more security, we tie things up, we disable the ability of many users to do their job. And now the user will try to hack the system. So now we have someone that, instead of helping us, being an advocate, they are trying to go over and do something else, like using a BYOD device or provision his own subscription, right? So usability needs to be in conjunction with security on that manner as well.
Yes, Yuri, that is why a couple of years back, if you remember, the behavior-based detection and response was a big topic of, for everybody, because we said we have to move away from signature and move to behaviors. The problem was the false positives was huge, and user experience were getting impacted. Now, what has changed now is that time we didn't had the data lakes, we didn't had the cloud to process things, what is required to be done. Now the world has changed a lot. Now we have data sets available, and we can and like I mentioned, we can build context with visibility, and then we can create granular policies, and based on that we can reduce a lot. Even if we have a doubt on that, we can actually participate the user to take a call, the legitimate user to take a call, saying that we are seeing something of this nature, looks suspicious, approve, reject, whatever it is. So the usage or the adoption of RPI, the machine learning and artificial intelligence is becoming big. While we are talking in, see, my understanding is machine learning is the concept or a framework was defined back in 1949. A person who wrote the book, and that's how it has come out as a frame on that. But it has picked up only in the last couple of years as a major use case. When I say picked up, researchers may be using it, large industries will be using it, but for a common normal organization, the usage started only very recently. The reason is that the technology was not adopted. We didn't know what to do with the data which was getting out. And again, coming back to people who are building a career, there's a great opportunity on that, on machine learning. But what you need to focus on to understand what are the use cases and how it can create an impact. You can learn the technology easily, but what you need to visualize or create the objective, saying what are the use cases you're going to build on that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very important point. And as you said, the technology is old, but just now being adopted. And I'll give a big kudos to the cloud computing, because cloud computing is really what really enabled that because of the core attributes of cloud computing, elasticity, and all those things that enable powerful compute analysis of big data. Probably in the past was so expensive to do those things that it was not practical. But with cloud computing, you unblock a lot of scenarios.
Yes, Yuri. If you actually look at cloud, made computing accessible to people faster and easier. Earlier, what used to happen is that we put a request, we go through the business cases, even if it get approved, we wait for 8 weeks to get a server done, softwares, then we run around. So by that time, everybody loses the interest. Okay. Now, if I say that I need to try out something, and I'm going to take a spin off few tenants from the cloud on that, it happens in minutes or hours. And that is why the technology change happened in a big way to make a lot of things possible.
And they changed rapidly, because in 2014, I was in Madrid delivering a presentation, and I remember it was a presentation about private cloud, and I remember how hostile the audience was with cloud computing, because in 2014, cloud computing was really not big in Europe. It was a lot of resistance to move to the cloud. Fast forward, not even 10 years later, right, to 2021 now, everyone is using cloud computing, right? It's business. There are businesses that born already in the cloud. There is absolutely nothing on-prem. So it changed rapidly because people are using cloud computing as an enabler for implementing security, and that's awesome, because I've been talking about this for a long time and how this shift was going to change. I remember writing an article for ISSA journal about that 3 years ago on how to leverage cloud computing capabilities to improve your security. And people were still skeptical, but now there is no skepticism anymore.
But Yuri, if you look at slightly on a different thought, CIOs loved cloud, because for them that 8 weeks waiting period, deprovisioning, all was big problem. So their life become much easier. Okay, CISOs really didn't like it. Okay, from the very beginning. Okay, because the fundamentals we build security is saying that I know what I'm protecting, where it is, and how it is. Okay, the cloud bought a lot of blind spot. But having said that, the perception changed a lot in the last couple of years' time. Okay, and I know many CISOs who did not sign up. It is CIO who signed up for the cloud. Okay, and he had no choice, or he was been called that you are the old age guy, so you have to so the only challenge part over there is that if you look at historically, we had centralized mainframes, then we went to decentralization. Now cloud is a centralization. If the security or a privacy become a consistent problem over the time, there will be a reverse transition or to a hybrid way. So currently, if you look at many organizations are cloud first. Okay, to sustain that, there is a lot of trust to be built on that. And one of the reasons so that's why I mentioned earlier also, most of the issues are not happened because of the provider. It is because of the people who configured the system from the enterprises. And that is where the education, awareness, tools, all is going to help them in a big way on that. So once you see startup, like you mentioned, an open source which is coming, is there, more tools coming and avoiding this blind spots and creating a better visibility and governance, this will strive much from them.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up with one thing here, because you talk about awareness, security awareness, and that's a very interesting topic. Because one thing that we noticed, for example, last year around March, and we released this on our Microsoft Defense Security reports last year, is that when COVID was growing worldwide as a main theme, we noticed an uptick of threat actors utilizing the theme COVID to perform social engineering types of attack, like phishing email, because they know that the likelihood that someone is going to click on that email is really high. So phishing email is still one of the main attack vectors. And threat actors, they will use the current theme. So it was like that March last year, we saw a huge uptick in phishing mails using the word COVID, because people were curious. They were clicking on everything. There were not enough information, So a lot of people at that time were somehow hacked because they just click on an email that has something to do with COVID. And that's where security awareness training plays a big role.
I agree, Yuri. So the another challenge people faced with the cloud is, earlier it was okay if I understand Unix, Linux, Windows, I'm a master. Okay. Now cloud itself is 4 or 5, and everybody has different architecture, different way of working on that. And then we need to look at, so many organizations also looked cloud as just an extension of their existing environment, and the security budget were incremental for that. But what is need to be done is that this is a big data center we own, or we co-own it, and where every consideration has to be. But I surely agree, cloud has done a fantastic help, or as a catalyst in the entire evolution of things which is happening on the technology. And machine learning has a long way to go on to make the real impact to everybody, and is started doing a good job. Thanks.
Yeah. Before I give I open up for questions, I just want to also to mention, and you can comment on that as well, that threat actors are also using machine learning. So don't think that only the good guys are using. The bad guys are also utilizing. Actually, the bad guys are also extremely aware of which products are already utilizing machine learning. So they create mechanisms to deviate the fence. So if you think about Petya in 2017, when Petya was analyzed, the source code of Petya, it was noticed that Petya was looking into specific security controls, and if that company had those security controls, like a specific anti-malware, a specific security control, they'll be like, oh no, don't continue on this system. Let's move laterally to another one, because this system here will probably identify us. So they knew how to evade the defense by looking at specific security controls and do not continue to attack that machine and move to another one. So that's very interesting also to think about how threat actors are utilizing this.
Yuri, it is quite worrying, because if you look at millions of data which has been leaked, is available for them to make their machine learning learn. They know the pattern of the passwords we use. They know the pattern of controls we use. They know the pattern of a lot of those things. For an attacker's perspective, that information is extremely valuable to come and hit you for a targeted one. And that is why the defense side, because they are in an offensive group, offensive is much easy. You can select the target, you know exactly where you are hitting. From a defense perspective, you are looking at the entire cyber world to say that who's going to hit you. So that is why the need of the hour, that we have more people who understands machine learning and how to build the right use cases for security, and the technologies evolve further to make it easily accessible to everybody and leverage it. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Sunil. Now let's open up for questions. We have any question there?
That was a very interesting webinar, Yuri and Sunil, and we hope it was worth your time. Before we begin with the Q&A, let us know if you're interested to learn about our programs. Please take part in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Our concerned person will get in touch with you regarding your interest. Now, questions for the panelists. Our first question is by Mikhail. He said, thank you for the presentation. And the question is, what advice can you give in line with open source solutions when it comes to machine learning and information security?
Sunil, I'll defer that to you.
Okay. There are many frameworks and solutions available. The problem, as I mentioned, enough and more open sources, the frameworks, documentations are available on that, and cloud is also easily accessible. What you need to start studying on that or building upon is saying that, how should you leverage this to create your business objectives? I think you need to start with that. And because I was actually Googling recently to understand what is available. There is enough and more available. Google could help you out on that. And many universities or colleges are also offering courses on machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, overall, as a professor at ACCU, this is a question that I get sometimes, and the reality is you need to first understand the foundation of everything, right? A lot of people want to jump directly to tools and to implementations, but I would say step back a little bit, understand the architecture, understand the models, and then go research which tool is best for you for what you want to do, because that also varies, depends on what you want to do.
Because like I mentioned, we also need to look at saying that, are we ready for the prerequisite to start it? So we don't have a limitation on the tools available. You need to take steps like Yuri mentioned. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Sunil and Yuri. This question is for Sunil. According to you, the cloud security should be divided into 3 steps, which are the traffic, the workload, and the cloud itself. Can you please clarify it?
It is, because traditionally when we talk about security, even when I started, if somebody asks what do you do on security on cloud, we look cloud as one entity. If we actually look at cloud is 3, as I mentioned, is the while you connect it, our workloads in the cloud, and the cloud itself. Only if you, and these 3 behave completely different, accountabilities are different, controls are different. So you need to look at each of that and say that who is connecting, where is it connecting from, am I doing a 2-factor authentications, is it required on that, all of the all of that controls required while you're connecting the poster of the device which is connecting, all of that. Because some organizations say that I'm going to create an express route from my enterprise directly to the cloud. I'm not allowing anybody to connect from internet directly. So those are all that part of that. Once it comes to the cloud itself, then you need to look at saying, how are you configuring it? Because many a times we are seeing data getting leaked from cloud instances because they were either doing a testing or a maintenance, and that time default settings were changed. So there is a lot you need to do at the cloud. And off the cloud is the responsibility of the provider. You need to have a governance and understanding what they're doing it and what you get out of it. So that's how you need to look at into 3 things. If you look at it as a single entity for the entire security consideration, you will miss out in things. That's what I tried saying.
Thank you,
Good job.
Sunil. So the question is from Isai. What are the recommended AI platform that can be recommended for machine learning in a small to medium enterprise environment?
Yuri, can you answer that?
Well, there are, you can start with Azure ML. Azure platform has Azure machine learning capability, so that's a good way to start, because you have trial version. It's fully documented, so you can create your models, you can test and everything. So if you want to give it a try, make sure to have a proof of concept established, a POC, and then do a POC on Azure ML. I think it's fully in the cloud. You are leveraging the power of the cloud to do your machine learning, and it takes advantage of the entire documentation, because it's very important that when you are adopting, that you have all the information that you need. And Azure ML is extremely well documented. So that will be my recommendation.
Sure. Thank you, Yuri. The next question we have is, do we able to mitigate incident like zero-day attacks using machine learning?
Yes, we can. The reason is that is where I mentioned earlier. Once we have defined what is good, the baseline of your traffic, the baseline of your postures, all of that thing, and then what are the calls an application or a system make on that, then an abnormal activity or anything which you have defined as per your policy, you can immediately identify that. The difference between the 0 day to this is not going to give the name of the guy saying this is exactly the virus which is going to hit you, or the attacker's name there, but you will surely understand there is something happening which is not to be is some abnormal activities happening on that, and that can be done only with machine learning and the automation part of it, because the reason is that you are handling a huge set of data and you need to identify in a very short time frame.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And just to complement, if you think a 0-day is basically a known vulnerability that is unknown. However, if you have a good machine learning in place, you still have the patterns of behavior of that 0-day. So once you understand the patterns of behavior and the model is trained for that, it can reduce, because it can quickly identify. So that's more from the detection perspective, right? Because it can detect an attempt to exploit the 0-day until you have the patch to remediate the 0-day. So that's a very common scenario, actually.
So just to add to that, many security control agents are becoming intelligent enough with machine learning, and the moment they find this abnormality or a change in the pattern, they are immediately informing their central cloud, and from there they are giving the signature or the control actions to all the systems which uses that. That is how we are currently detecting many 0-days at a much faster level. Earlier, what used to happen is the campaign happens for months or years without getting noticed, and their target organizations will have a huge impact. Now that is getting avoided to a great extent because of the machine learning deployed by the tools. And earlier, as I mentioned, once even if you detect it, what is important now is to how do you remediate and take an action on that. That's where the orchestration of the controls has to come into picture. Immediately you see a behavior change, you should have a response mechanism defined which says that if I'm seeing of this thing, quarantine this machine off, or immediately push additional, if it is due to a vulnerability missing or anything on that, immediately push it on to make that system susceptible to that. So that is how it has to happen. Richard.
Thank you, Sunil and Yuri, for answering that. So we'll just take the last question for the presentation. Is there a parameter to measure how efficient different cloud service providers are? Why is Microsoft Azure better than Amazon? It's the question by Pies.
Well, I'm extremely biased, right, to answer that question. So, Sunil, do you want to have a view from a non-vendor perspective?
No, I have not done any comparison between the products, because my view is that based on your use cases and the feasibility to adopt it, so when I say cost, the data center proximities and all of that thing is the decision makers matter. And many a times everybody keeps their better standard, and some has extremely capable capabilities on few areas. But if you ask me a product specific, I don't have, I have not done that.
What I would say is this: when you are selecting your cloud provider, you have to look at the entire stack, right? What that cloud provider has to offer you from the trust perspective. So research on that. What are the services that you are trying to move to the cloud, and how can you leverage native capabilities on that cloud provider to protect the resources? Because some cloud providers, they have more security controls than others. So it's up to you to really evaluate the use case scenarios, as Sunil said, that you need to move to the cloud, which workloads, and what are the options that the cloud provider offers you to protect those workloads and to manage the security posture of those workloads. Gartner always says that you should leverage native tools on the cloud provider. But of course, there are exceptions. There are many situations that having a single pane of glass across all providers can also be a solution. So it's really up to you to evaluate according to your own needs and according to the workloads that you want to move. So that would be my non-biased advice.
And also to add on that, you should understand, you should consider that you're buying or taking a platform where you are going to build over the time your much bigger use cases, much more use cases on that. So look at it in a long-term perspectives also. It is unless until it is a one test scenario or something you are trying it out. That's how you need to look into that.
All right, thanks, Sunil.
Thanks, Yuri.
Thank you again to our wonderful panelists for answering those questions and for the great presentation and sharing the knowledge to the global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we're really looking for more and more sessions with you both. And but before we conclude the webinar, would you like to give any message to our audience?
Well, my only advice to wrap up is make sure to invest in secure hygiene. Secure hygiene is still #1 reason why threat actors are able to get into your system in the first place. So threat detection is important, but before threat detection comes secure hygiene. So invest on that.
My advice is that we are in an excellent time. A lot of resources are available to learn. The industry needs skill sets. We need new use cases, new thought process on that. So leverage it and become masters of it, because industry really need each and everybody who is building their skills on this. Thank you.
Thank you again to both of you. And I also like to thank all the attendees who have joined the webinar and took out time to be part of CyberTalk series and took part in the poll. And with this, we like to end the session. You all can disconnect the line. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, Sunil. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.